I think I'll do something a little different tonight. Having this recurring from a retreat. I think what I'll try and do with the time, since we have a big group and we have the group in hyperspace, is try and be somewhat explicit about the nature of his path from beginning to end. And that maybe that will help you to understand the remarkable, elegant orderliness of this path. So, there are essentially three maps. It is the roadmap that in Indo-Tibetan Buddhism, in the essence tradition, there's the roadmap that takes you from the very beginning of these practices up through getting a taste of true nature of the mind, taste of awakening, as we would call it. There's a second map that is designed to give methods that stabilize that awakening up to the point that you have it all the time, 24/7. And there's a third map which brings you from, starts when you have awakening all the time or most of the time, and brings you to Buddhahood. And having been working on that map, the way that this unfolds is now much more clear. So I thought it might be useful to spell it all out, so that at least intellectually you'll have some sense of where this thing starts from or where it takes you to. In the vehicle of the Mahayana, or the lofty vehicle as it's called, the great vehicle. So, starting with the first map, which those of you who take the retreat have some familiarity with. But even before that, these practices traditionally start with preliminary. And there's a whole world in that. We could spend 10 years just talking about preliminary practices. And in the Tibetan tradition, some of those have become quite routinized and stereotyped. You can think about 100,000 prostrations. But that's not a useful way of thinking about it. There are 4 main areas that we cover in preliminary practice. 4 things that need to get done. And the first thing that needs to get done is something like, we would call them in the West motivational practices. What is it that leads you to, when you're caught up in the busyness of everyday life, what is it that leads you to set as a priority any kind of spiritual practice? So you actually set aside not only time to do that, but to make it the central focus of your life living rather than something that you dabble at or think is a good idea. And in Western psychological terms, we call that state of change from. Western terms, in psychology, people are pre-contemplative, contemplative, to the action stage or in the maintenance stage, 4 stages of change. Most people go into psychotherapy when they're contemplative. They've contemplated the fact that there's something wrong with their life. And number 2, they've contemplated that there is some course of action that they continue. And we know from Western research that there's a lot of people out there who are pre-contemplative. They either don't know they have problems, everybody else may see that they do, or that they know they have problems, but they haven't quite gone around to how they're going to go about doing anything about that in any kind of systematic way. In either case, they're not ready for therapy. And likewise, in the East, there's a literature, Tibetan Buddhism, similar to the stage of change literature in the West. The idea is that spiritual practice is hard, it takes a lot of work. And there are many people who are not so much motivated to do it. So the motivational practices in Tibetan Buddhism are called loji, the 4 attitudes. They're done in sequence. The first thing you do is you look at what's called precious opportunity, daljoa. It's the visualization you do in the context of everyday life. You think about other life that you might have been born into other than what you got now. You think about being born into a life where you lose your mental faculties. You say dementia. Lots of people do that these days. So you imagine as if that were your life, do a quick visualization on that, drop it, and come back right what you got now, that you actually enjoy the full mental capacities and intelligence and do a practice like this. Then you imagine all the people who go through life-threatening medical illnesses. You imagine that that's your lot in life, and then you drop that and you come back to what you got now, which is that most of you enjoy reasonable health to support doing this practice. When you imagine the context of the culture we live in, you imagine all the people who live in war-torn cultures, what it's like as if that's what you were growing up in, where everything is in chaos. And you imagine that you live in a culture where things are reasonably safe, even after 9/11. Then you imagine all the people throughout history who live in times that they don't have exposure to spiritual practices. And you imagine in contrast how fortunate you are. And each one of these scenes hammers home the point that the preciousness of what you got. You got reasonable health, you have the intelligence, you have the stability of a culture, you have exposure to all the teachings, complete bodies of teaching. You have a community of practitioners that you can do this so you don't have to do it alone. You have favorable conditions to practice under. That's a lot. And after you go through the visualization enough times, you get the point that this is a rare and precious opportunity. Then, the next thing you do is you imagine impermanence. Nothing lasts. Think of all the material things in your life that wear out. Came back from India. My brand new luggage bag there. Bag handle landed, basically lasted 2 flights. Then it's time for another one. Impermanence. Everything changes. Think of all the relationships in your life you've been through. Nothing lasts. And ultimately, when you go through all the things in life that materially, interpersonally, the things that don't last, then you come look at yourself, you look at the aging process, and you actually visualize your own aging, and you visualize, it culminates with visualizing your own death. You rehearse it. That makes the motivation a little bit more urgent, moves you along a bit. And maybe spiritual practice is something that would be useful. Because if you do these practices, there is no death. Not possible. If the body calls. Rinpoche says, body like a hotel, you guessed. What? Better to have a 5-star hotel, but still you're the guest. Doesn't last, right? The stars progressively go when you get older. Is there anything good about anything? Maybe the wisdom will come. Not physically. Okay. So the third one is a sort of like causes effect of karma, like a cost-benefit analysis. You imagine different wholesome and unwholesome actions that you engage in, behaviors. And then you sort of predict how that's going to impact on you and others over time. Sort of string it out, predict the future. And then after you see what you can imagine to be the destructive effects of certain courses of action, it just makes it hard to go there. Including all the time that you waste and things that go nowhere. So when you finish that, it not only hammers home the point even more clearly, there's a certain urgency here, but it begins to affect not just your attitude, but the behavior. You begin to think more about your behavior and start to reprioritize things. And the last is the sufferings of the 6 realms of samsara. You go through all of the suffering of the hell realm, and all the suffering of the hungry ghost realms, and all the sufferings of the animal realms, and the god realms, and the demigod realms, and the human realm. You will. When we're talking today, get demigod realms are where the movie stars live. Those are our demigods. Their own kind of hell. Rich and famous and miserable. Right? So after you go through these 4 logia, the 4 attitudes, the outcome, if you do them enough, is that you change your attitude, and therefore slowly in the context of your everyday life, also your behavior. So you're beginning to increase the motivation to think about the value of spiritual practice and to actually start organizing your life around doing it. You accomplish what in Western terms we call states of change. You become contemplative. I don't mean that in the meditation sense. In the sense that you're thinking that there's a course of action here that's more useful than others. And the rest of the stuff doesn't matter so much. Then the rest of the preliminaries, what you might work on, there are 3 big areas. If you watch your mind and all of the spontaneous states that come up during the day in our ordinary experience, they're predominantly negative states. So the next area to cover is how in your everyday life to shift the balance so that there's more positive states coming up than negative states. Because if you don't do those kind of practices, then you play out all the problems on the meditation pillow. If you go right into meditation and you have more negative states than positive states, meditation doesn't do very good. If too much negative stuff comes up. And the likelihood is you'll get sick of the meditation, or in Western terms, you'll develop a phobia of meditating. But if you follow the natural sequence of this, what happens instead is you shift the balance slowly over time through these practices, so that more positive states come up than negative states. That's when you're ready to meditate. And lastly, the last big thing to cover as part of preliminary practices is instilling the view of where these practices will take you. The view of the ultimate state of awakening of true nature and the full manifestation of that awakening, enlightenment. And usually Guru Yoga is how you instill that. You put forth an image of some embodiment of that ultimate state, like Padmasambhava or whoever. And you visualize it in such a way that it activates your own Buddha nature, your own awakening nature. And then you finish the visualization with the idea that your mind in its original Buddha nature state and the ultimate state of Padmasambhava's mind are inseparable. They're one and the same. You all have that same Buddha nature, just clouded over. So the presumption here is everybody is awake all the time. Awakening isn't some state you ultimately find. It's always here. Every moment's here. Too many clouds and you don't see it. Sun always shines, but we don't see it when it rains. When the clouds clear up, we say the sun comes out. The sun doesn't come out. The sun's always shining. Awakening doesn't come out. The brilliant nature of an awakened mind is always shining. You just don't see it because your mind's full of clouds. Yes. So when you do the Guru Yoga, it sort of activates that nature, gets it started again here. You want to clean it up. Okay. Those are the essential ingredients of preliminary practices. The next series of meditations is to train the mind. Concentrate. So, the purpose of concentration is to stabilize the mind and free it from its distractibility. So you keep bringing the mind back over and over again on some object and directing the mind back, intensifying on that object, so the mind stays more and more closely engaged with just the intended concentration object and doesn't go anywhere else. The opposite of concentration, distraction. The extreme opposite of that is what we call in the West attention deficit disorder. So when you're training concentration, you're training newa, which means to stay. The mind stays more and more. First, you train what's called continuous staying. So maybe the mind stays on the concentration object. You might use the rising and falling of the breath. You might stay for a few milliseconds. If you keep bringing the mind back many, many times, there's a cumulative learning effect of that. We tie the rope of mindfulness onto the object. Time and time again, the mind learns to stay. Ultimately, it will stay continuously, 5-10 minutes at a time. Ultimately, as long as you want. Then you'll notice that it's this background noise. It's only partially staying on the object. But what you're really doing is apportioning maybe 20% of your attention to the concentration object, while at the same time you're still engaging all that background noise of thought. Tibetans call that nature partial staying. So there are methods to help you to develop what's called complete staying. And when you develop both continuous and complete staying, the mind pretty much stays on the concentration object fully. Okay. If you continue to train your concentration, you can stay on that object so closely that all the dynamic energy that makes up the breath, the body as the meditation object will change. It's not a solid object anymore. The body loses its solidity, the breath loses its solidity. If you really concentrate intensely, you start to see the concentration object as just energy. You're shifting from what we call the coarse level of mind that has content to the subtle level of mind. Mind moments, 100,000 bursts of energy and movement in the blink of an eyelash. And you open up that whole level of mind. Then you have to learn to concentrate all over again. It's sort of like shifting from a stable target to a moving target. The whole different set of rules. Sometimes we call that the difference between concentration with support and concentration without support. So you learn to stabilize the mind at the subtle level. It doesn't really mean concentration without support. It means concentration as less of a support because the object's sort of always moving and changing, so it's not as easy to latch onto it, but less of a support. But when you get into that range and you perfect the concentration, you'll find that you can continue concentration with continuous and complete staying, and it gets more and more natural and ultimately automatic. So that you can stay on the concentration object with absolutely no effort and no need to apply any remedies anymore. Ultimately, when you perfect concentration, whatever you intend to put the mind on, it stays on for as long as you want it to stay on without going anywhere else. It's not an instant of distraction. And when you get deeply concentrated, all that background noise of thought stops. No thought elaboration. The Tibetan word for concentration is shine, a compound term. Newa means staying, shiwa means calm. It means from the mind perspective, the mind stays continuously over time, as long as you want, and completely at any given point of time on the meditation object without going anywhere else. And it means from the events of the mind, there's no thought content, absent of any thought, calm. Shine literally means staying - calming meditation. We say the mind becomes serviceable. That level you're operating out of intention, not attention. Whatever you put the mind on, whatever you intend to put it on, the mind stays on that fully. You think of the ordinary mind as like a wild elephant. When you train it with concentration, you have the full strength and intelligence of that elephant mind to work for you. Whatever you put it on stays on that. Doesn't go anywhere else. There's no extraneous thought anymore. And useful. Why do we train concentration? It does two things. It supports the insight practices. First, because one of the outcomes of concentration is what we call mental pliancy, shinchon. Mental pliancy means that the mind operates with the speed of intention, very quick, much quicker than thought, much quicker than attention. The more you have mental pliancy, the greater the speed of the mind. You can focus on things with the quickness of the speed of light. And you're going to need that quickness for some of the higher realizations. But there's the ability to follow the path when you're given pointing out instructions. At a certain point, you're not thinking about those instructions anymore. You're just following what's being pointed out. The mind will follow it with its intention. You get out of the way. You don't have to think about it. The mind will just follow it. We can carry you directly into awakening with the instructions. They work for thousands of years if you have enough mental pliancy. Because the mind will simply follow what's being described without thought. But the second thing is that concentration supplies stability of mind. Because when you get to the higher realizations, it's always about our view. The view is the meditation. But without concentration, the view isn't stable. You think that when you look into the nature of the mind, it's like putting a light on things in the mind and seeing how the mind constructs experience, and looking even deeper into the real nature of the mind. The looking is like putting a candle flame to something so you can see it. But stability through concentration, or the concentration provides the stability of that candle flame. If you don't train concentration as trying to look where the candle is always flickering in the wind, so what you see gets distorted because the candle flame's always flickering. But if you train solid concentration, your view is unshakable like a mountain. Then it's easier to open up this point. So that's concentration. Then comes insight. there are two levels of insight, ordinary and extraordinary. In ordinary insight, we look into how the mind constructs experience, how it constructs sense of self, how it constructs external reality, and how it constructs time and space. Those are the big three ordinary insights. Emptiness means, an unfortunate term, it doesn't mean things go away, or they have no substance. Emptiness, a good synonym for emptiness is mere constructions. The mind is constructivist. It's always making representations. That's how it works. And when you look at things as empty through emptiness meditation, it's not that they don't exist. What you're seeing is the way they really are. They're just constructions. The problem is that we reify those constructions. No G. We make them as too real or too solid. For example, emptiness of self. Kids aren't born with a sense of self. Can develop a sense of self around 18 months, right smack in the middle of when kids develop representational thinking. Sense of self is a construction, it's a representation, useful in everyday life. It's useful to have Dan. My whole life is organized around Danness, right? The central organizing principle. But ultimately, I forget that it's just a construction. And if I forget that things are a construction, there are two consequences. Input. The self has grab. All my experience is filtered through the self, and my experience then has grab. I develop likes and dislikes and preferences, and all that grab creates more and more suffering. And second, Numpa. The self becomes like a massive cloud, and all the stories and constructions around the self are like more and more clouds building up that become too solid. And I think the self is too real and too serious. I forget it's just a construction. And with that comes Munpa, the capacity to obscure, clouds over our true nature. I'm not trying to get rid of the self. When I do emptiness practice, I'm trying to get rid of its capacity to obscure. External reality becomes a solid structure of mind. I think there's a world out there. Time becomes a construction of mind that gets reified. Relatively speaking, time is useful. It's a central organizing principle. We all operate by it. But we think that's merely a construction. The construction of time as an internal structure of mind isn't really complete until about 8 years of age. Late in childhood. It's useful. I organize a lot of my day around time. Relatively speaking, but ultimately I forget that time is an empty construction. I actually think there's an external time, cosmic time clock somewhere in Greenwich. And with the reification of that time clock, it creates grab. So now I race around like crazy trying to get deadlines done. And a lot of suffering comes from that. And it creates room for the capacity to obscure. I forget the timeless, boundless nature of awareness, part of my creation. Good. Each one of these emptiness practices helps you to see things just the way they are, as merely constructions, in such a way that they no longer obscure. You don't have to get rid of them. I don't have to get rid of Dan. I don't have to get rid of time. I just have to get rid of the capacity to obscure. That's what the Heart Sutra is all about. Many of you know this, some of you are new tonight, so I'll say it. Each one of these practices in the Heart Sutra cleans up a cloud. So then the result of doing emptiness practice is what we call shifting your basis of operation. Shifting it to some level of awareness. It's all about awareness that you wouldn't have seen before. Gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisvaha. In Sanskrit it means gone, gate, gone, gate, paragate, gone beyond, parasamgate, gone way beyond, bodhisvaha, ooh, what a realization. First gone, You think in your everyday life, you confuse awareness and thought. You think they're the same thing. And if you concentrate enough, most thought elaboration will stop. So you'll have long periods of stillness. And what comes out of that is in your direct experience, not conceptually, the direct experience of operating out of awareness rather than operating out of thought mode. It's sort of nice. Awareness gone beyond thought, the first gate. Then if you practice emptiness of self, you search for the self, it's unfindable as a construction of mind. It keeps receding from your awareness. What's left after you do the emptiness of self meditation is a level of awareness that's cleaned up of personal identity. I shift my basis of operation, so now I'm operating out of awareness itself, which is cleaned up of Dan. We go back to the meditation. Dan isn't doing the meditation anymore. Awareness itself is. That's the second gate. Awareness itself gone beyond personal identity. Paragate. Still that awareness will fluctuate. And the experiences and the field of that awareness will fluctuate in time. Well, doing the Gaussian as emptiness of time meditation, or what I call the beyond three times meditation in Mahamudra, there are various ways of doing this. And I'll open up a level of awareness that's timeless and boundless, because time and space are together. That's a huge shift. That's the beginning of the gateway of the Mahayana. But all of the Gaussian and dialectical practices are done. Now I open up a level of awareness that's huge and timeless and boundless. Ever-present, timeless awareness. Paragate. Timeless, boundless awareness gone way beyond the conception of time. Now I'm in the realm of the essence tradition. Now I'm operating out of a level of experience as vast. Within the field of that experience at the subtle level of mind, everything is interconnected. That's where Mahamudra practice is like ocean and waves is useful. Now I can let everything arise within the field of that awareness, but I'm looking at where I'm looking at it from that's more interesting. I'm looking at all that stuff that arises from the field of boundless, changeless awareness, like an ocean of boundless, changeless awareness looking at its own waves. And everything will come up as another momentary construction, empty. And whatever arises in that field dissipates within that field, and there's your first taste of spacious freedom. Within the vastness of that space, the awareness remains absolutely still, without any grand. There's your beginning taste of freedom. I can deepen that realization to non-duality. Now I can come to see that the field of awareness and what gets expressed within it are the same thing, just as an ocean and the waves are inseparable. A lot of popular teachings these days on non-duality. Non-duality is not to be confused with awakening, but it's a precursor. Okay. Now, if I press further with my inquiry, what I'm noticing is that things come up in this ocean of awareness. And at some point when I watch these waves arrive, like waves on an ocean, at some point I realize that they're empty constructions. But if I press further with that intention, the quickness of the mentally pliant mind, I can start nailing the realization much more quickly. So as soon as something begins to arise, I already know it in its true nature as empty. Moment by moment by moment, I nail it that quickly, not after the fact, right at the moment. And everything will come up spontaneously and quickly, already expressed as empty. But there will still be a lot of assumptions that I'm making. You know, in the background of my awareness, I like to think them as sort of like windows that are miniaturized in your computer that influence your operating system. Yes? So you got to step back with your best intelligence and absolute honesty and look at all the assumptions that are operating about your practice that you're not seeing as empty. All that's going to come into it too. All the assumptions that you're necessarily going to have problems, have had or will have certain problems, those are empty ideas. All assumptions that you can't do this, empty idea. All assumptions that there's a certain outcome that you're looking for, that you will get or you won't get, all empty ideas. All assumptions about certain states being more or less desirable, empty idea. The whole thing goes into the hopper. Come to know what it means to practice, see everything as empty. The emphasis being on everything. And then you extend your range of application of emptiness to everything that possibly can come up in your field of experience. And when you have immediacy and range, you'll have an extraordinary samadhi called automatic emptiness. Everything comes up very quickly, spontaneously, every moment already expressed as empty, and at that point you don't have to do anything anymore. Because any attempt to do anything in the meditation is empty upon arising. But more importantly, that is the foundational state for all the advanced practices. Why? Because it clears conceptualization. Because as soon as you notice the tendency to conceptualize about state or outcome, immediately it's expressed as empty and it clears itself. Mr. Lopez says, then the mind becomes like a crystal clear pool of water when all the mud of conceptualization settles. And there's something about the lucidity of that awareness that will become more transparent to you. Mind what I'm saying. The higher teachings, if you try to think your way through it conceptually, you're hardening the mind and you actually damage yourself. And you're making it harden the mind so it's harder to awaken. Don't jump ahead and try and take the advanced teachings until you establish a good foundation to automatic emptiness. Because it's the only thing that corrects for the conceptualization in a way that increases the likelihood that you'll get a taste of awakening. With that as your foundational state, then you can open up to a taste of an awakening mind. But here's the last big cloud, right? Your information processing system. Right here, every moment is an ocean of boundless awareness love, which is your true nature. It's always right here. But you don't see it. Because your information processing system, by its definition, operates to partialize. And as long as it partializes, it obscures the totality of always what's right here. So let's think of your information processing system in terms of speed. From slowest to highest. It takes about a half a second to 2 or 3 seconds to think something out. Quicker than that is attention. To direct your mind to something, to pay attention, takes about 200 milliseconds. To be aware of something is much quicker than that. In Western terms, we can measure awareness as far as our electronic board will take us in about 5 milliseconds. That's because the machine is limited. Awareness works at the speed of light. Much, much quicker than attention. And the quickest process of your information processing system is called, we may have a word for it in the West. I like to translate it as particularizing. If I say to you right now, look at the entire field in front of you, everything right here, all at once, and try and hold a panoramic view where you're taking everything all at once. Go ahead and do that. And what you notice is the mind does this. It's always going out to things. I like to translate particularizing ilamachipa as the tendency of the mind towards something that makes it something particular. Like an action potential. In every moment, that's the quickest operation of our information processing system. But here's the issue. If what is right here all the time is a boundless ocean of awareness love, you're never going to directly experience that through conceptualization. If the great Dzogchen scholar says, the function of conceptualization is to delineate. When I develop a concept, I'm saying this as opposed to that. And delineation means we're partializing, we're segmenting, and breaking up the totality of reality that's always right here. At a higher speed, every time I pay attention to something, I'm partializing. At the highest speed, every time I make the tendency of the mind towards anything, I'm partializing it. Say, everything that your information processing system does, every moment, at any level of speed of processing, obscures the true nature that's always right here. So, what I call crossing over instructions help you to not get rid of your information processing system, but to get rid of its capacity to obscure. If you're given those instructions and you're in the right state of automatic emptiness, conceptualization won't get in the way, attention won't get in the way, and with the right, setting up the right view with what I call Mahamudra non-meditation instructions, or Indulgent Trekcho, thoroughly cutting through instructions, which refer to cutting through individual consciousness, or cutting through the information processing operations that obscure, you will open up awakened awareness. You will find that you will shift your basis of operation so you're operating out of awakened awareness rather than ordinary awareness. Parasam Gate, awareness gone way, way beyond the operations of your information processing system. Ooh, what a realization. Oh, his Baha. What is that like? Well, from the other emptiness, or from the self-emptiness side of that, or the negation side of the equation, you find that you've shifted out of the constraints of your individual consciousness. So then you're now operating out of this boundless ocean of awareness love that has no location, no reference point. Other than that, there's nothing you can say about it. Or as Mipam says, even to say this is it is to lift the mark. Then, from the other emptiness, or the positive affirming side of that equation, the only thing you can say is that there's something self-evident about the nature of awakened awareness that's different from ordinary awareness. It has Dhamma, brightness. It has Nar, it has intensity. It has Rigge, it has awakeness. And there's something about that lucidity that's so different from ordinary awareness. Not that it's just boundless, not that it's non-dual, but the brilliance of the knowing is what characterizes the different. Like the sun that shines brilliantly when the clouds clear up. Self-evident. But mind you, all you do is set up the conditions. The self doesn't awaken. Dan doesn't get awakened. If you clear away the structures of the mind like the self and set up the conditions, then the awakening happens to itself by itself. Why? Because it's part of the hardwiring. Buddha nature knows its own intelligence. It knows its own path. Just get out of the way. And then you get a taste of what a Kashinamgal called little plains. That's the first map. Now, the second map is how you make those little plains a forest fire. You have to develop that. The Tibetan word is kyangwa, to nurture something. You're going to give it some care. You're going to nurture it. And bring out this awakening through a process of kumbha, familiarization, until it's so familiar with you that you have it all the time. Some of you know what I'm talking about, and you're working on that with Rinpoche, or with the advanced courses. So how do you get it from one little play to have awakening 24/7? Okay. There are three things you're doing. The first is you set up exactly the same kind of conditions that established the awakening before. We use the same kind of non-meditation instructions in Mahamudra, or Trekcho, or thoroughly cutting through instructions in okay. And set the condition just right, and if you get them just right, it will keep opening up. And what you're looking for here is frequency and duration. You're looking at the establishing the condition, so on the pillow and then eventually off the pillow, you open up awakening more frequently and for longer and longer periods of time, longer durations. And then it will cloud over again. This idea that you awaken and that's it is not usually the course here. Or as the pull-up option says, most people who awaken put the snooze alarm back a lot, on a lot. It comes over naturally so because of all the habits of life. But you have to keep working on this. Simple lecture. So the second set of practices are to look at what clouds it over. Or as one of our students, Corinne, you look at your favorite clouds. Because each of you, with your best intelligence, will find that for you there are certain patterns of what clouds it over. Right? The cloud of self. All the stories that go with the self. That's a big cloud. Likely to keep coming back. It was what the Sufi master Hafiz said, to look at the tiresome project of self. Then, external reality. The great Dzogchen master Longchenpa says, as soon as they get off the pillow, out there-ness comes back. The solidity of time. Getting lost in thought. Getting lost in emotional states. Getting lost for yogis, getting lost in special states, bliss, luminosity, stillness. These are the usual clouds. You have to look at what your favorite clouds are and practice emptiness. What do you practice? Depends on what your basis of operation is. With your best intelligence, if you're operating out of your ordinary mind and you have thoughts that get in the way or emotions get in the way, you practice emptiness of thought and emptiness of emotion. If at that time you're operating out of awakened awareness, you view the thought and emotion as the liveliness of an awakened mind. Because awakened awareness has what we call liveliness. It's always expressing itself to itself. And then you view the thoughts as no more than the expression of that awakened awareness. So it can be none other than that. So how could it possibly cloud it over? And you either do emptiness practice or liveliness practice, depending on what your basis of operation is. Ordinary mind versus awakened mind. Either way, you've got to clean up the clouds. And the third are metacognitive practices. As you go about your life, on and off the pillow, ask yourself the question, what's my basis of operation right now? Am I lost in thought mode? Am I operating out of self? Am I in timeless, thoughtless mode? Am I in non-doing mode? Or am I in awakened mode? And if you keep looking, you're going to train that metacognitive awareness. And the result of that is going to be, over time, just by looking into it, immediately it starts shifting in the direction of awakening. Or you can do the relational view of that metacognitive training. You can develop a special heart connection with a teacher. Many of you have done that with Rinpoche. And as soon as you think of Rinpoche, you shift into awakening. Or you do it through Guru Yoga. Many of you knew Albisa Baba Guru Yoga. And as soon as you have the idea of Albisa Baba, you shift into awakening. In all these three practices, setting up the view, looking at your clouds, practicing metacognitive abilities, all of these things are designed to increase the frequency and duration of operating out of awakened awareness, the infinite ocean of awareness. In my view, it's easier to do that on the pillow and then take it off the pillow. Most people start getting little flames of awakening towards the end of the retreat. They come back, they get in more retreats. Then they start finding that in the retreat, they get it earlier in the week rather than just at the tail end of it. If you do it a lot, you're finding it almost while you're sitting. And you find in your daily practice, you're never pretty much off on the pillow all the time. Then you can start taking it off the pillow. A good practice at that point is to set your view up, shift into awakening mode on the pillow, and as soon as you shift into awakening mode, play it out a bit, nurture it a bit on the pillow, and then get it right off the pillow and take it off. Then there's a set of practices that we call mixing practices. Your task is to mix awakened awareness with everyday activities. Mix it into movement. Take it off the pillow and mix your awakening into exercise. Mix it into walking. Mix it into sitting. Mix it into all daily activities. Mix it into speech. When I was with Menri, he had me sit out in front of his door, and his schedule is sort of like the Dalai Lama's, because he's the Dalai Lama's meditation teacher. So as a senior person, you get one person after another coming to see him. So one of the things he made me do is sit outside and say hi to everybody and talk with them while they were waiting to see him. And the task was that I had to mix the awakening into all the conversations. And then you have to mix it into thought and practices of mind. Mix it into while I was sitting on the computer composing something. That was interesting. Then after a while, all the activities of body, speech, and mind are mixed into awakening. And after a while, you start mixing into everything else, including the task of their exercises that then carry that awakening into deep sleep and to dreaming sleep. So you basically have it all the time, 24/7. That completes the second map. And when you have it 24/7, pretty much all the time, that's the next major accomplishment. And the third map is the map that takes you to full Buddhahood. There are 4 areas of Buddha training. The first begins with what's called automatic Dharmakaya release. There are 3 levels of automaticity. Samadhi of deep concentration going all by itself during the concentration series. Automatic emptiness during the emptiness meditations. And now we get the third and last automaticity. It is the most important one. I like to call it, it's called Rangro, which means self-liberation. But a more accurate translation would be automatic Dharmakaya release. Here's what happens. You set up your view like an infinite vast expanse, but you add something to that view. You view that infinite vast expanse as the groundless ground of being, of which everything arises in an unconditioned way. As reflected by the brilliant flashes of awakened awareness every moment by moment. We call that the inseparable non-dual pair of groundless ground and awakened awareness. So when everything arises every moment, comes up in an unconditioned way, and it immediately dissipates. You don't engage in anything. And one thing that changes is it's no longer about emptiness practice. Everything that comes up is like drawing on water, it leaves no trace. And the key is things come up in an unconditioned way from groundless ground and disappear into groundless ground without any mental engagement. The technical terms for that is Dzogchen Panglang. Don't accept anything, don't reject anything. Leave it alone, Somar. Whatever comes up is just there, it's part of the groundless ground. It's events, it goes back. There's no ordinary mind engaging it anymore. It's just reflected by Wikpa, awakened awareness. Like things coming up in the mirror. They're not affected by the mirror. The mirror isn't affected by the things that come up, it's all the same. And here's what happens if you hold it like that as your view. At this stage, the view is the meditation. The view is the meditation. If you hold it like that, Everything that comes up every moment leaves no karmic trace. That's the beginning of Buddha training. It means there are no further karmic impressions, because what makes memory traces, karmic traces, is mental engagement. Since you're not doing any of that anymore, because there's nobody home in there to engage anything, it's all groundless ground, what's going to happen? All the previous karmic traces come up at an accelerated rate and release themselves. And that process of automatic release every moment leads along a path of what's called dharmadhatu exhaustion. At first, what will come up will be lots of very quick, very fleeting impressions from your life. Memories of your life. Just come up and they're gone. At an accelerated rate. You awakened awareness watches all the personal memories from life just come up and release themselves. All the stuff of all the relationships that you have that have to grab in that, it's all just come up and they go. All the stuff about strong emotional states in your life just come up and they go. And after a while, all that stuff starts to wind down and the same stuff comes up from previous lives. It all comes and goes. And the end point of that, with this accelerated process, is there are no negative states left in the continuum of your experience across lifetimes. You're extinguishing all negative states. And what will flourish or shine forth is padak, the original purity of all the positive states of mind. It's not like they suddenly come up when you transform anything. That positivity is always there, but it's obscured by all the negative stuff. And when it clears, it's clean. We call that 3 months, stainless line. It's so clean and pure and wondrous. And the awakened awareness at that point is just stably brilliant and wondrous. And there are no negative states left. It's dharmadhatu exhaustion, or the clearing of the impure visions, as it's called. The first part of Buddha training is the exhaustion of all negative states and the flourishing of all positive states. There are 80 positive qualities of a Buddha mind. When I was in a retreat going over this stuff, the end of the retreat, Menri was teasing me about it. And he said, "You Western psychologists, and I said, "Yes, we get preoccupied with negative emotional states." And I said, "Yes, I'm a professional about negative emotional states. I specialize in them in the paper." And he says, "What's the matter with that?" And I said, "Nimpa." He said, "Yes, Nimpa. They all obscure." He says, "Look at your mind now and look at the difference." And I said, "Well, it's vast. It's absolutely crystalline clear. It's clean. It's stainless. If there aren't any impurities whatsoever, and it's rather remarkably wondrous." He said, "Well, why waste all this time on all this negative space? Why waste all your time on the clouds when you can dwell in the sun?" He made his point. So the first domain of the third map of Buddha training is the transformation of affect. It doesn't transform, it just gets rid of the clouds. It seems to transform, though. Nothing left negative. The ultimate of that, kuntu sangpo. Everything good. Now, the second domain is the seeming transformation of perception. Because we see stuff, and we have an ordinary mind of things in an out here world, but we don't see anything out here. What we're seeing is the mind's capacity to make representations. Awareness expresses itself. It's constructive. It makes representations. There's no outside world that we're seeing. What we're seeing is what the mind's represented. We're seeing the mind's awareness because we can't see anything other than that. This is what we see. But what's going to happen is that somewhere along this process of Buddha training, you'll start to look more carefully at the issue of perception. And you're going to look really at the issue of how awareness creates all of this show. All of this is the display, the dance, the rupa, the play of awareness. And you start looking at how, you don't look, but Rigpa looks into itself. Awakened awareness looks at itself, making its own display. And that's quite remarkable. What will naturally unfold is how the display is constructed by the spontaneous play of awakened awareness. And that's in the slower path of that, it's called the 5 wisdom energies. The outcome is everything you're going to see in terms of energy and light. There's nothing solid left on board. The quick path, the hyperspace path along that same way is the lamps practice, the secret energy channels. And in the secret energy channel practices, you open up a pathway to look at how the world is constructed. Out of the eyes, there's a film upon which all of existence is projected. And that begins what I call the trivial visions. What you start to see is the lively dance of awakened awareness every moment. And that awakened dance will start to be more and more fluid, and nothing is solid. You see the world through the fluid movement of awakened awareness as it expresses itself. And then awakened awareness will express itself not so much in fluidness, but it will create all these pigletts, like very quick moving energy, little bubbles of energy, sort of like watching water boil. You get many, many bubbles very quickly. And then it all slows down and you get perfect spheres appearing in empty space. And the spheres get more and more organized. It's sort of like looking at cells under a microscope. Very organic. And of course, there's no duality. And then what you start to see is all that the T-blades and the cells and the energy, they start to produce bursts of energy. Brilliant rainbows. Colors. And that pretty much finishes the first level of vision. And in the second level, all of those visions, all that fluid dance of energy patterns itself. You start getting patterns. When you watch the organization, and then you're going to learn something that goes beyond liveliness. What you're going to learn is the Rigpa not only expresses itself through its own liveliness, it organizes itself through itself. That's a really important point. Now, on the third level, you're going to watch it. Rigpa awakened awareness start organizing worlds. This is just one bubble. You're going to watch the myriads of worlds being organized. And there's your key to all at onceness. All those worlds begin to get organized. And you just watch the whole dance of the world organizing itself. And the awareness pervades all those multiple myriads of worlds at once. Yes. What's left if you follow that path? Everything in your perception, there's no solidity left in the world whatsoever. The only thing that's left is the body becomes light. Sound becomes pure sound. Well, pure sound isn't hearing that piece of paper or the bell. Awakened awareness has a sound. You can hear it. Always here. It's soft and alive, and you can hear it. And if there's no duality left and you watch this whole show, here's an interesting thing that happens. You see, earlier you probably had a lot of difficulty with thought, and you try and catch thought with your awareness. What is thought? It's a movement to the mind. It has a certain directionality to it. What happens when you hold your awakened awareness all the time? You notice that awakened awareness has a directionality to it, right? And when you have absolutely no duality in the mind, here's what happens. The directionality of thought and the directionality of awakened awareness are not different anymore. They're the same thing. We call that discriminating wisdom. The absolute pinpointed precision of that intention. And ultimately that turns to light. So all that's left are rays of light. You're not going to get rid of that directionality. But if you clean it up, it's no longer the directionality of thought movement. It's no longer the directionality of awakened awareness. It's like the rays of the light that are crystal clear every moment. Everything is reduced to light, sound, and light red. That's the world that is not very solid and rather magical. Sometimes in the Dzogchen text that's described as hetawa, the condition of chronic wonder. So, now the body is really interesting, because if you follow the secret channels in the body, not the central channel practices. And the trouble with central channel practices is you have to represent it. Do all this work to visualize the side channels and clearing them of all their impurities, and then visualizing the central channel, that you can, squeeze the pot, base breathing, and you can squeeze all the think lazy energy into the central channel and let it rise and heat it up and all. A lot of work. But if you're operating out of a Dhammakaya release, all you have to do is take the view of an awakened mind like an infinite vast expanse, and with the simple intention of looking at the body, it spontaneously arises in boundless ground like an empty glass bottle filled with light, hanging in empty space. And all you have to do is put the intention into looking at the channel, and it will spontaneously arise perfectly clear in that body. King of Samadhi, pinpointed focus against the backdrop of infinite vast expanse. You don't have to do anything anymore, no representation. The channels spontaneously reveal themselves to themselves. Well, when you watch the energy flow through those channels, you watching it, it's reflected by awakened awareness spontaneously, and the flames surge every moment. And what happens is the body gets more and more transparent and more light, until there's absolutely nothing left but clear light body. The imprint of the body stays as long as you're alive. But you've, as Rinpoche said, body like hotel, you guessed. Now, the hotel is pretty bright, cleaned up, switch to clean. Doesn't even take long to do. Just opens it up itself to itself. Then you get a taste of clear light body. And if you follow those practices right down to the elements in the body, which will naturally open out for the rainbow lights. The outcome of that is rainbow bubbles. The body is reduced to nothing more than rainbow light, because all of those elements that seem solid are just light and color. Then you've mastered fully the process of living and dying. There is no death. Yes. But the third part of the map, or the third domain, is the transformation or seeming transformation of the body, the clear light body, and ultimately the rainbow body. Now, the fourth and last part of the domain is if you follow the dance of how awakened awareness organizes itself to itself, and you follow the path of how it keeps organizing and displaying with the world, that's the key of what will open up into the limitless Buddha realms and all the mind-to-mind transmissions, which seem to be like downloads of teachings. The path has its own intelligence at that point. If those teachings aren't out there, they're all within the field of awakened mind, so you will know everything you need to know along the way. And ultimately, the mind and the awareness will pervade all of those realms, the infinite thousands of myriads of realms, like one great sphere, big temple. But then they all get unified in one ultimate reality that's at once completely empty and completely full of, it contains the content of all realms and time. And your mind pervades all of that. And you manifest the bodies of enlightenment. At once, the infinite vast expanse of ocean of love, the Dhammakaya. At once, the brilliant intensity and radiance of awakening, the Sambhogakaya. And at once, the myriad of displays that appear in various realms, the various using in a modified next. And all that's left at that point is enlightened conduct, enlightened activity. The operation of perfect conduct for the sake of helping being in an ocean. You didn't move over cat one. There's the cat. You know. No negative states, the flourishing of all positive states in a mind that has cracked the eggshell, as it's called, and pervades many realms and times simultaneously for the sake of helping beings across all of those. The scope of that mind is limitless. Enlightened activity is inexhaustible. The best measure of realization is conduct. When at the conduct of the Buddha, we call that enlightened activity. So, my friends, that's the description of the whole path. Yeah. Now you gotta do it. Let's take a break here. You want to start? Sure. Okay. So, set up the body posture so that you're sitting upright, like a mountain. And setting our motivation to practice with great care, not for our own, not just for our own benefit, but also to benefit the larger social field that we coexist within. Simply steer your awareness to the field of sensation, to the felt sense of the body. But and continually steering the mind back to the field of sensation. Just calmly staying on the field of sensation of the body. Within the field of sensation, become aware of the movement of the breath, as an expanding and contracting movement. and switch to the 3-point object, following the movement of the expanding breath, the movement of the contracting breath, and the self-sense of the body posture. Continually steering your awareness following everything about the movement of the breath. So the mind stays close to it. To deepen the staying and begin to intensify your interest, begin to look a little closer. So the mind is more intimate in the movement of the breath, more intimate with the self-sense of the body. So you're looking closer at everything about the movement of the breath. The whole world to keep track of, just in the simple expanding of your breath. And deepen your interest a little more. Admiring everything about that breath. Look a little closer. Feel a little deeper into that breath. So you're picking up every single moment of just that exhalation. Following the whole movement of the breath. And even more. It's really burning with your staying. So very closely. So very, very closely. Completely intimate with each movement of the breath. Immediately penetrating each moment of the breath and the substance of the body. Now ease up on the concentration. We're going to shift to the mind perspective. So rather than focusing on the movement of the breath, focus on the awareness that's co-arising with the movement of the breath, the felt center of the body. Focus on the knowing. Each moment you're knowing the breath. Awareness. Like space. Knowing the movement of the rising breath. Focus on the knowing, still and unreactive. That's aware of the falling breath. Still, unreactive, space-like knowing. Awareness gone beyond thought. That day. Now bring to mind your usual sense of self, your personal identity. So you can evoke it and take it as an object of reflection. So for example, I would evoke Dan-ness, and I would look squarely at Dan. The thing about self-representation is you can evoke it and you can observe it. You call that in the West evocative memory. So evoke your sense of self, observe it. Notice any personality characteristics you loosely associate with that sense of self. Familiarize yourself with the target of your search. And now take your awareness, because awareness operates at high speed, quicker than thought. And let your awareness roam through the regions of your body. See if you can find anything in itself, any independently existing thing that is that personal identity. Anywhere in the field of bodily experience. You have to actively search, let your awareness roam around everywhere in the body. And the more you search for anything independently existing, anything in itself, the more what you search for will recede from your awareness as unfindable. Emptiness practice is near-based about unfindability of the target. If you think you find an independent basis for that sense of self, if you think you find anything that's substantial, roam around in that area and break it down into smaller units of analysis. You think you find it in the head, for example, where? You think it's in a certain region of the brain, or roam around and find where. Is it in the cells? Is it in the molecules that make up the cell? So the more you search, the more what you see from your awareness is more and more unfindable. And you keep actively roaming around, searching, until you notice a shift in your basis of operation. What you'll find is you start operating more and more out of awareness itself, no longer obscured by the seemingly solid, empty construction of personal identity. Right here, awareness itself as your basis of operation. Okay, now evoke your sense of self, personal identity once again. Familiarize yourself with the target of the search. And evoke your personal identity. Notice any personality characteristics you associate with that sense of self. Now take your awareness and let it roam through mental content. You find any independently existing thing that is that self captured in any specific or contained with any specific thought that comes into your mind, any specific emotion. When you find it in any specific sight or sound or any perception. So whatever arises in the mind with respect to mental content is an independently existing thing that is that self anywhere in the content of the mind. And the more that you actively search, the more what you seek recedes from your awareness as unfindable. And as you continue to search, at some point there's a shift in your basis of operation. What remains right here is awareness itself, no longer obscured by the empty construction of personal identity. And would you open up a level of awareness that's cleaned up of the cloud of self, and you start operating out of that instead of operating out of self mode. The second gate in the heart speaking. Awareness itself gone beyond personal identity. Now, with awareness itself as your basis of operation, go back to concentrating on the 3-point object. And see what it's like to continue concentrating when it's not your personal identity that's guiding and observing the effects of the meditation, but awareness itself that's guiding the meditation. We call this concentrating having ended into empty. itself gets out of the way, awareness itself will do a better job with the concentration. Awareness gone beyond thought. Awareness itself gone beyond self-representation of personal benefit. The first two shifts in awareness along the path of the heart.